What are your thoughts on the idea of there being a divine mother?
What do you mean by divine mother?
The idea that God has a wife and a counterpart that is female.
I would ask people, what evidence is there for that? I haven't seen any evidence for that. I haven't seen any evidence of that from the scriptures. I do know that God made both men and women in his image. Okay, now image isn't a physical thing. It means that we're God's representatives here on earth. Okay, we have mind, emotion, and will, and that we know, we feel, we want, we can make moral choices, and we can be his ambassadors. But I haven't seen any evidence in Christianity, certainly, and I think Christianity is true because God exists and Jesus rose from the dead. And you might say, well, how does that show that Christianity is true? Because if Jesus rose from the dead, then he's God, and whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. Because I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says, okay? So I don't see any evidence from Jesus, the New Testament writers, or the Old Testament writers about a divine mother.
Okay.
All right? Do you think such a person exists?
Absolutely, 100%.
Why?
Because I'm a girl, and if God's a guy, where did I come from?
Well, because God is so powerful, he can create both sexes. God doesn't have genitalia. He's just called a father because he has fatherly qualities. He's a protector. He's a creator. He's a provider.
So he just decided on a whim to make reproductive systems the necessity of male and female?
Yes, male and female. Why? Because we are imaging God here, and we are creating as imagers, not in the same way God creates, because God creates just from his power. We create by procreating with someone of the opposite sex.
So you're saying the power that God uses to create is different than the power we use to create?
Oh, yes. God is wholly different than us. God created males and females so we could create and be imagers of God. We could create offspring. And that's what we're supposed to do as imagers. But God himself is an immaterial being. He doesn't have genitalia. And one way we know this, other than the scriptures, is just think about any being that is created like us. We're composed, right? We have parts. And if we're composed, somebody must have composed us. But you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. At some point, you're going to get back to an uncomposed composer that composed everything else. And that's who we are. We are composed, but God is uncomposed. He doesn't have parts. He's immaterial, spaceless, timeless, powerful. All those attributes we talked about before.